Hello, this is Pick, and welcome back to my developer commentary for Integration by Parts DX presented by FTB. The first thing I'm going to do in this episode is make a celestial crystal. This is done by throwing a rock crystal and a stardust into liquid Starlight. As a bonus, you get 2 stardust back. The celestial crystal stats are random, which means the rock crystals you make them from don't matter. You just have to sit and wait while the crystal grows. By pointing some starlight at the crystal that's growing, it can grow faster. And with it, the iridescent altar. This is the biggest table Astral Sorcery has, plus sometimes bonus items in its recipes. It also holds the most starlight, but the things it gives access to makes it a lot easier to craft stuff, especially during the day. Its structure builds upon the celestial altar, which is good, because there are plenty of other structures you'll need anyway. The next plan is to get into blood magic, so to do that I need a Rune of Wrath, which requires slime pearls. Easiest way to do that is to use nocturnal powder in a swamp. Plenty of vanilla spawns here to go around. It also requires some other reliquary drops, but I have plenty of those already. Basically everything else I needed I either already had or wasn't too difficult to craft. This was all to wait for nighttime so that I can make containment chalices, which will allow for production of wills, then soul steel, and finally the blood altar. You can see the extra relays around the altar. These are for bonus ingredients which some iridescent altar crafts require. To set up containment chalices, you'll want a chamber to keep the items from flying away, with a hopper at the bottom to catch them. This should be at the midpoint between the chalices, which means it's better to work with odd numbers. They'll run until they can't perform a recipe any longer. To store the wills, Quark's crate works excellently, as it's designed for things that don't stack. Should you want to automate the chalices, they accept fluid from the bottom. This method creates 2 types of will, a stronger one that's worth 1.0 and a weaker one that's worth 0.1. The weaker one is designed for crafting that uses the will item, such as Demon Stone, while the stronger one will be used in the Hellfire Forge to make crafts that require will. To get your first crafted blood slime balls, you can either stand in the smeltery, get some blood from the nether slime islands, or melt down some rotten flesh. I chose the third option. By throwing some will and some stone into liquid soul, you get demon stone. Right click with the sacrificial knife to put life points into the blood altar, then put the demon stone into it as well and it will infuse to create a blank slate. Do the same with a rock crystal to make a weak blood orb. By placing the blood altar onto a donut shape of blank runes, you can upgrade it to a tier 2 altar. The altar is capable of accepting upgrades, but I don't have any yet. Should you ever want more out of your rock crystals for crafting purposes, you can left click on them with the star metal cutting tool much like you would a star metal ingot. This will break the rock crystal into its separate components based on each of its stats. This also works for celestial crystals. After making an apprentice blood orb with the dragonstone, I can craft self-sacrifice runes. These have the special trait of increasing the amount of life points I get for every time I right-click with the sacrificial knife. Now I can make the Hellfire Forge, and with it a petty tartaric gem. A tartaric gem is capable of storing will in it, like the ones that we've been crafting. However, we're going to need a better way to get a lot more of it soon. So remember when I said those crappy rock crystals are good for crafting? Well, since I need an infused crystal sword for the sentience sword, this is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that. By putting the rock crystal sword into the starlight infuser, it will become an infused crystal sword. When you kill a mob with the sentience sword, it will allow the mob to drop a will as well as its regular drops. This means that you can farm will off of hostile mobs and they will go into the tartaric gem automatically. Note that the drop chance is also affected by looting, so I enchant the sentience sword with looting from a book I had. Now it's time to move the blood altar outside since it's going to get a lot bigger. In addition to runes of self-sacrifice, there are also runes of sacrifice which increase the amount of blood gained from a mob that's killed near the altar instead of damage you take. There's also runes of capacity which you can get from the quest reward that increase the capacity of the altar by 2,000 millibuckets for each one you have. The default capacity is 10,000, so with 4 you'll reach 18,000. My true reason for rushing blood magic like this was to gain access to routing nodes. These are an incredible form of item transport as they allow wireless transport between 2 points as long as the nodes are within range of each other. You can make a network as large as you want as long as they all connect to the master routing node. They have plenty of filtering options and can even filter based on number, which is something that will be very handy in a short while. To craft more filters, I'll need the alchemy table, so I take care of that. You'll need to put a blood orb into the alchemy table for it to work, as it drains life points from your internal network. Of course, to fill the blood orb, you can link it to yourself by right-clicking and then placing it in the blood altar while it has life points in it. This means that it'll have enough life points to craft what you need as long as the tier matches. In order to set up routing nodes, you need to place down your master routing node and then shift right-click to store its information, then link it to an input routing node where you want to extract items from, and an output routing node for where you want to send items to. You can of course use any number and send them over any distance, and they can send between inputs and outputs without having to worry about it. However, in order for anything to send, you need to have a filter that tells it what to send. If you want to send absolutely anything and everything, then just use a blank filter. If you want to send specific items, then you'll need to define which ones you want to send. Holding the Node Tinkerer will show lasers between the nodes that are connected in a given network. You'll see all of them at once though. To make more filter parts, I'll need a Magician's Blood Orb, so I need to fight the Gaia Guardian. It requires a flat arena around a beacon and some Gaia pylons made from elven materials. This is where that nether star I got earlier comes in handy. Ready for a fight? I figured I was very overprepared for this, and it turns out I was right. With middling gear, many people struggle with this, especially with the wither effect it gives you. If you really don't want to deal with the wither, a witherless rose will make you immune to it. I just brought some milk to undo the debuffs. My damage is very high, so already out the gate I'm going to be finishing this rather quickly. The Guardian is summoned by shift right clicking the beacon with a Terra Steel ingot, and you can't get buffs from the beacon, so don't bother. I would say to do this during the day so you don't get extra spawns causing you trouble, and as a bonus, the undead take extra sun damage. With my chain lightning, any additional spawns are no issue at all, though I guess if I was doing it at night I would have more Starlight. Doesn't matter if it's a pixie or wither skeleton, if it's not strong enough to survive an endless barrage of lightning. Also, there are anti-flight measures, so be careful. After you win, it drops 8 Gaia Spirits, which have a number of uses, but I'm going to fight the Tier 2 Guardian using a Gaia Spirit ingot instead of a Terra Steel. However, the fight is very similar, so I don't think it's really worth showing, so I'm just going to cut to the next part. Much like the ignition lens, if you have a beam of light going through a crystal lens that has regeneration instead of ignition, it will heal you up. It's useful for having near a blood altar to get that little bit of extra recovery if you're going the self-sacrifice route. Botania's elemental runes can be crafted into Blood Magic's ritual chalk, which will be used to make blood magic rituals later on. However, I'm just using that to get through the quest so I can get to the thing beyond it. Now I can prepare to go to dimensional dungeons. To make the blank portal key, I just need to take an iron key from Blood Magic and pour some gold over it, as well as make the portal structure. Right-click the blank portal key on the key inscribing station or a blank end portal frame and it'll turn it into a dungeon key. You can then place that into the top block of the portal structure and it will make the dungeon spawn. You'll spawn into a portal room, and your main goal here is to collect loot bags, as they'll have a couple of items for progression, but also some other useful goodies. To get started, you'll have to run around and find mobs to kill, as well as treasure chests to open. Of course, if you're playing in multiplayer, the chests will have looter support, so both of you can loot the same chests. You'll notice mobs have both increased HP and potion effects, and that determines what type of loot bag you'll get. Mobs without any potion effects drop iron loot bags, while mobs with potion effects drop gold loot bags. The loot is generally better in the gold loot bag, but iron loot bags have their own unique loot that you might want as well. Rooms with advanced portal keys are kind of rare, so I got very lucky seeing one so soon. Also worth noting is that loot bags are affected by looting, and you can't break any blocks inside the dungeon. I didn't get all too many loot bags from this one, but that's because there weren't very many mobs in it. Mobs don't respawn in dungeons, so you won't be able to go and farm stuff off of them unfortunately, unless you happen to find a spawner. Also, my helmet is enchanted with night vision, so that means you guys can see inside the dungeon without it being super dark. This loot was small, but that's okay because I'm going to be getting a lot more loot bags as I raid more dungeons. After getting some portal crowns and adding them to the structure, I can finally use those advanced keys. This means I can enter an advanced dungeon which has harder mobs, and more treasure, of course. That means I can spend less time grinding in here. Here's a chest full of the loot I've obtained and a bunch of other junk I found while I was in there. You'll notice I've gotten some neat stuff like advanced circuits, some stuff I can't use it like mechanisms upgrades, and some unique stuff like an iridium ingot and some discs. I can't use that stuff yet because I haven't gotten enough tech progression, but it'll be nice to have this stuff for later. It also gave me some extra materials for Astral Sorcery and Botania, so that helps. With that adventure out of the way, it's time to make some more tech progress. The Metal Empowerer is a multi-block that, well, empowers metal using metals and empowered oil. Since I'm going to need many infused crystals, I made a type of batch automation to produce them a little more efficiently and without as much clicking. So what I did was I put an item user on each of the 5 outer pedestals that requires a craft. And then I have 2 more on the center pedestal, one to place the item on and the other to take it off. The comparator is what detects if there's an item on the plate, and then once it determines there is one, it activates a timer, and that timer activates the other one once the timer's up to take the finished product off. It doesn't work every time, but thankfully it's not that big of a deal because I'm only using this for batch automation anyway. I'll be upgrading to the crafting core when the time comes. Empowered steel, as well as all the other empowered metals, start opening up more options for automation, among other things. This will let us start making our way towards space, though that's not the point for this episode. My first empowered steel is going to go towards the liquid fuel generator. This is going to be a very useful multi-block to have, as well as automating empowered oil being a good idea because I have it for both crafting and power. I never quite went over how to make empowered oil, so to summarize it quickly, you melt flax seeds in the melter, and that makes seed oil. Then you dump the seed oil on the ground, throw a crystallized flax seed into it, which is made by putting a flax seed into the energizing orb, and then you make empowered oil by throwing an empowered seed into that crystallized oil, the empowered seed being made on the infusion altar by surrounding a crystallized seed with redstonium. You'll see how it's automated very soon. Before that, I'd like to make a quick detour to craft a storage scanner. The storage scanner is useful because it looks around it to see what chests are nearby and it will be able to access any items in its vicinity. This means that if I set the range to 5 blocks, it'll see any chests in a 5-block radius around it. You can also remove certain inventories from it if you don't want it interacting with them, and make them routable to have the storage scanner be able to send items to those locations. Of course, you don't want it sending everywhere, and I would like it to send to the drawer system first, as well as the sorting, but for general use, it's going to be very handy for making crafting simpler. It does ruin the sorting though, so be careful of that. So here's the setup for automating empowered oil. It does work automatically, even if it does misfire sometimes. To explain what's happening, 2 garden cloches are producing flax seeds, which go into the melting chamber and the energizing orb. At the melter, they turn into seed oil, and in the orb, they turn into crystallized seeds. The crystallized seeds then get sent to the precision dropper, as well as an item user from the center of the infusion setup. In addition, redstone is being imported from the main storage via routing node and sent to the other energizing orb, which is making redstonium. The redstonium fills the outer item users. This uses a similar setup to the manual one from before, but I added an ender hopper with a drawer on it to collect the misfires if they drop. All of this is hooked up with routing nodes, so this drawer is always taken from first as it has higher priority. The nodes on the orbs are set to only have one of each respective item in it at a time, so the crafting performs without issue. Once the empowered seeds are made, they get sent to the other precision dropper. Now a fluid placer places the seed oil. If the sensor sees seed oil, it signals the droppers to fire one of each seed, which converts it to empowered oil. The other sensor then sees empowered oil and signals to the fluid collector to pick it up. I plan on placing the liquid fuel generator down near this setup, but first I'm going to need to make the liquid Starlight that's going to act as the coolant. The liquid fuel generator requires both a fuel and a coolant, and empowered oil happens to be the most powerful fuel available. While I'm finishing up the casings for the generator, now's a good time to mention that the Carpenter allows for better crafting of machine ports. This means that you can use much less materials to get up to 4 for each port per craft. This will definitely help as I'm running low on redstone due to the redstonium being drained from the system because of the empowered oil automation. I'll be working on automating redstone in the next episode, but for right now it's just gonna have to be. As you can see, this generator is quite large. Similar to the PEED engine, you'll have to manually extract from the energy output port because it doesn't output the energy manually, and well, yeah, you kinda just have to deal with that. Blood magic is going to play an active role in the generation of liquid starlight. However, I'm going to need to know what's going on in my life point network more readily if I want to start draining it. To do this, I can craft a divination sigil using some arcane ashes, a redstone, and a blank slate. For any arcane ash recipe, simply place the ash on the ground and it will draw a circle, then the ingredients from left to right. The divination sigil will tell you how many life points are in your network with a right click, and if you right click on a blood altar, it will tell you its tier and storage. Rituals drain your life essence, so knowing how much I have at any given time is going to be essential. To perform a ritual, you're going to need a master ritual stone and enough ritual stones to form the structure of the ritual itself. In my case, I'm using the Serenade of the Nether, so I only need 4 ritual stones. Then, hold down right click on the master with the ritual diviner and it will automatically place all the ritual stones with the correct inscriptions. The ritual then needs to be activated by right clicking a weak activation crystal on the master ritual stone. If you have enough life points in your network, the ritual will begin. The Serenade of the Nether will continuously produce lava, so as long as there's life points in your network and there isn't a lava right now on top of the ritual stone, I'll be collecting it with the fluid collector and you'll see the full system in a moment. To get more life points out of my self-sacrificing, I made an incense altar. This is the structure which can be expanded to add tranquility to the altar and greatly increase the effectiveness of self-sacrifice. To build it, place the altar itself in the center and a 3x3 ring of anything around it. Underneath the altar is preferable. Then place some of the special blocks listed in the quest book as paths coming out from the central 3x3. You're going to want to keep the incense altar in proximity of your blood altar. In the spaces between the paths, make rings which contain a given type of block. This includes crops and some other stuff, but crops are easy for right now. It's better to just view what I'm doing. It will display a tranquility number in the top left, which is slightly hidden by my jetpack numbers. Sacrifices now take 90% of my health at once, and I can get up to around 8,000 life points per my current health bar. Finally, it's time to talk about the Starlight setup. To explain this start to finish, liquid starlight and lava are mixing in containment chalices. This makes sand, but more importantly, aquamarine shale. This melts in this furnace running on lava power to make 4 aquamarine per shale. These are put into the Auto Starlight Infuser, a machine whose sole purpose is automating recipes like this. It's made the same as the normal Starlight Infuser, but with some machine parts on it. Out come resonating gems, which get put into item users that put the gems into light wells, and the light wells make liquid starlight. The starlight feeds back into the system, as well as heading towards the generator. The Serenade of the Nether keeps lava being produced, and that gets collected and sent to the chalice and geothermal generator. This is a fully self-sufficient system except for the life points, which will be taken care of another time. So with that, this is the end of the episode. Thank you for watching. This has been Pick. I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.